Hello there guys, welcome to the Paths of Ascension YouTube channel. This is the first video in the Truth series, where we will be looking at lifting the veil of deceit, and shining some light on some of the lies we have been fed all our lives. In this video, we will briefly touch on some of the lies in our recent history. If you recently realized how fake our news reports are, you can begin to imagine how fake our known history is. Megalithic structures and historic buildings tell us the real story. We've been indoctrinated with a false story and timeline, full of half-truths and deceit. The true fabric of our history has been modified and modeled. That's why we don't know where we're going. Because we don't know where we have come from. It's a lot like, before us, there was a civilization that was responsible for the most advanced technology ever developed. Because of the deceit and falsehoods that underpin our historic narrative, like contemporary science, our history, as a discipline, was corrupted a long time ago. Our history is a set of lies agreed upon. We are told that the first power tool was invented in 1895, and the drill weighs 8 kilos. And only in 1957 Bosch produced more usable power tools. So how did our historic ancestors, a more primitive people, design and build some of the structures we have encountered? How were all these monolithic stones we found around the world cut with such incredible accuracy? And today, we can't even achieve this level of accuracy with the arsenal of tools and equipment we have at our disposal. On megalithic walls, each gigantic block of granite is different, and fits with millimetric accuracy. Just look at the geometric accuracy of staggered wells. What's wrong with all these giant channel networks around the world? The Erie Channel in the United States stretches over 584 kilometers, is 12 meters wide, and 4 meters deep, and was built in 1817. There were no civil engineers in the United States at the time, and the people who built this amazing homework were rookies, so we are told. Not only did they have to dig by hand, but they also made their way through the virgin forest. They had to build complicated aqueducts and locks, and they had to make their way through the Niagara Escarpment. But dynamite hadn't been invented yet. It is said that they were finished in 7 years. This means they completed 1 kilometer every 5 days. Yeah right, what a record for the rookies, and the power tools, and dynamite that haven't even been invented yet. It is clear that America's first settlers didn't build these channel systems. All of the magnificent castles around the world had been built without any plumbing system, or methods to properly warm the rooms. Do you think royalties would live in such conditions? The pyramids of Giza alone seem like a total impossibility to build. The large pyramid itself consists of 2.3 million blocks, some weighing between 20 to 80 tons each. These blocks were cut off with copper chisels, and transported more than 800 kilometers in wooden boats, we were told. Not to mention the perfect angles, dimensions, and alignments with the stars. Then there's all these strong stellar, or strong bastion all over the world. These, we are told, were built within the age of cannons and gunpowder. They're huge, with perfect geometric patterns. Our primitive ancestors didn't have the technology to see these structures from above. And they built this? Just look at the Arc de Triomphe, for example. They say it was built between 1806 and 1814. It's made with 63.695 meters square limestone and weighs 95.407 tons. How did they transport this amount of limestone with their horses and carts? Not to mention manufacturing? Just look at the massive intricate sculptures that grace all their sides. Or the perfect repetitive pattern of ornamentation that decorates the arch. Or the amazing detailed roof. No power tools, no machinery, just handmade. Is that even possible? See all the other glorious buildings in this city, or many other cities on this earth. The world's first photograph, or at least the oldest preserved photo, was taken in 1827. Now we have visual evidence. When you look at the roads in these old photographs, you'll notice they look unfinished, dirty and muddy. We also see rated primitive constructions that commensurate with the people of that era, of a generation of horses and wagons. A generation still ignorant of technology that was to come. When we are presented with photographs of the rather primitive Victorian people, within the shadows of the most magnificent, great and brilliant architecture a human being could ever imagine, we must begin asking questions. How did they build this? We see these amazing buildings everywhere in that century's photography. Like London's monstrous Crystal Palace, with the largest glass area ever in a building. We are told it was built before England had automated glass making. Or Westminster Abbey and Parliament. Examples are infinite throughout the earth. All these magnificent constructions are in direct contrast to the primitive people beneath them. Parliament Library in Ottawa, Canada, is a wonder of architecture. The first major settlers arrived in 1800, and at the time of construction, the city's population was less than 20,000 people. Would a great and glorious library really be a priority for these settlers? Why does it look like the building was cut from Europe and stuck in Canada? Australia, as we have been told, began to settle in 1788 with a population of 859 people. In 1812, 24 years later, it had a population of 12,630 people. When you look at the many Victorian-style buildings in Melbourne, Sydney or Adelaide, with their finely detailed construction, it becomes obvious that this cannot be the work of unskilled convicts with some horses and carts, and without machinery or power tools. These few thousand people would have struggled to survive in the harsh environment, and would definitely not have the time, or means to build these wonderful buildings. We have Old Penn Station in New York. Completely mind-blowing proportions in size. With amazing details. We are told it took 6 years to build. Even with our machinery, power tools and crane technology we have today, we couldn't build such a building in 6 years. And most importantly, today we do not produce this kind of architecture. The general term for this type of architecture in America is called historicism. This is a coined term to describe a style of architecture that copies the style of another period in time. We see large bows and columns, large needles, bow windows, towers, domes, sculptures, huge doors, circular geometric windows, clocks and bell towers. The footprints of this impossible architecture are literally everywhere. We see a primitive town against a backdrop of such impressive infrastructure. Something doesn't add up here. When you see these old photographs, you might ask, why did they build these windows so close to the ground? Wouldn't that cause major problems with water entry and humidity? You will see first floor entrances elevated from ground level, or see tickets going below ground level, or we see bottom windows and stuffed entrances. And do you think they spend endless hours digging massive holes, and move the earth in horse carts before construction begins? We can find that in almost every major town on our land. We also found many ancient structures that lean as if at some point the ground beneath these structures loosened and liquefied. There is no official explanation to justify the buried architecture we see. There's no explanation to justify the amount of mud we see in these photographs. The earth is devastated, but architecture is great, perfect and intact. Buildings sank or the floor rose at least 3 meters. In excavated buildings, we can see that what lies beneath are not the remains of the previous civilization, but most of the time, the buried structures are consistent with the architecture we see above ground. That means the structures are even bigger than originally suspected, making them even more impossible to build for a Victorian generation of horses and carts and those that existed before. Natural soil buildup and soil liquefaction are not satisfying explanations of what we see here. Anything that happened had to be something much bigger and widespread, like a natural or artificial earthly cataclysm of some sort. Citizens of the 1800s were responsible for moving much of the mud, leveling the ground and digging buildings, suggesting what happened had happened very recently in their past. The total absence of a reasonable conventional justification for the buried architecture we see suggests that our land's controllers are deliberately trying to hide what really happened.